welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing a reading wrap up. I haven't done one of these in a really long time and I'm actually extremely behind. So I think I'm going to just do the books up to like the end of 2020, and then I will save my 2021 reads for a new wrap up. So I'm not actually going to do all the books that I've read since my last wrap up video because there is so many. Now some of these books I've talked about in my best books of the year video and most disappointing books of the year video. So if I did, I will not talk too in depth about them and I will point you to those videos because I do talk more in depth about them there, but I do want to kind of get all of these in one wrap up video for you guys, and so yeah, that's what we're gonna do today, and I really needed to get this done, so that is what we're doing. So the first book on this list is a book that I talked about in my most disappointing reads of the year video, and it was Tomi by Junji Ito. So I was really excited to read some Junji Ito. I thought his work sounded really interesting, and there's so many amazing reviews of his work. Now one thing that I can say first off is his art is amazing. Like, he's a great artist and I absolutely love like the art in his graphic novels, but I have to say, like I said in my most disappointing reads video, I just was not a fan of this book. It got super duper repetitive, and I would say probably about halfway through I already knew what was going to happen in all of the stories. Like, I already knew the plot line. It was like reading the same story over and over and over again, and it just got really old really fast. I would say that I thought some of them were interesting. There were certain ones that I did really like, but most of them I just kind of felt like they were just boring and repetitive, and that's why I put this book in my most disappointing reads video. I've read actually another Junji Ito book this year, which will be in my next wrap-up video, so we'll talk a little bit about that more there. Actually, no, I'm going to talk about it now. So the reason I'm actually going to talk about this now is because I have it as a physical copy because I got this from the library, but I have to bring it back soon, so I'm going to go ahead and just talk about it now since I have it with me. But this is Shiver, also by Junji Ito, and this I also gave 3 stars, just like I did Tomi. You know, I just don't think that me and him mesh well together as far as like what I like to read. Who was it? Books with Emily Fox said it really well in one of her recent videos. She said short stories to her kind of feel like skeletons of a story, and it was such a perfect description about how I feel sometimes about graphic novels, and it was exactly how I feel about Junji Ito's work. I feel like his stories are like skeletons of stories. It almost feels like they're really great concepts, but I always want more. There was one story in here called The Eternal Dream, I believe, and it was such a good idea for a story, but it was so short and I felt like I wanted so much more because it was so interesting, but it felt like the skeleton of a story. So I think it's like the perfect terminology to use when talking about like Junji Ito's work. I want a little bit more, I want more depth, I want more character growth, and I feel like I'm missing that with his work. And I also don't feel very like disturbed with his work for some reason. Now I know he's supposed to be horror. I don't know if I just don't get scared when I read, but it's really hard for me to feel fear or a lot of disturbance when I read books, and his books just don't give me that horror feel. I don't feel scared, I don't feel disturbed. There was only one story in here that I felt disturbed with, and it was the Greased, I think is what it was called, Greased. That was super disturbing to me. Like, I hate anything that has to do with like pimples and pimples popping, anything like that grosses me out so badly, and that was exactly what Greased was about. So I can say that he did it for me with one story, and again I gave this 3 stars. Just not my favorite thing in the world, but yeah. I don't know if I'm going to pick up any more Junji Ito. Now that I've read 2 books, I really wanted to read Uzumaki, which is the spiral one, and now that I've read 2 of his books, I don't know if I'll pick up Uzumaki. I just don't know. If you guys think I should, let me know, but I'm kind of thinking it may not be for me. So the next book was actually a book that I pre-ordered at the end of 2019, and when I read the synopsis of this book, I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds so interesting. That sounds exactly like something that I would like, and it's a topic that interests me a lot. And it's the book Those Who Pray, and this is by Jennifer Moffett. So this is a young adult book, and it's about a cult. And this book takes place in the 90s, so what is that, a historical fiction? Is that considered historical fiction now? But basically this is about a girl who goes to college, and she's so excited to go to college because she's so ready to get her kind of life moving. She feels kind of stagnant in her hometown, and she feels like when she goes to college she's going to be able to make new friends, and she just loves the idea of going to college and just, you know, getting her life moving a little bit. But once she gets to college, like the friends that she makes end up being deadbeats, they're all drug addicts, and she has like no friends, she doesn't do anything, and she starts to get really, really homesick because she can't make any friends. And then there's this one day where she's sitting at a coffee shop, super, super lonely, all by herself, and this guy comes up to her and he starts talking with her and kind of creates conversation with her, and she gets really, really excited because she feels like somebody's finally trying to make friends with her. And so he invites her to kind of like a game night at this cafe with him and a couple of his other friends. And so she goes and she really feels like she's made a connection and she has, you know, friends finally. And what ends up happening is these people are actually part of a religious cult, and they end up bringing her into this cult, and she ends up going on a mission trip in Italy. And what happens at this mission trip ends up being really, really bad. Lots of kind of dark, scary things start happening on this mission trip, and she starts to realize that what she is experiencing is a cult, and it's very controlling, and there's a death, and it's just really, really, really fascinating. Like, if you like the topic of like cults, then I think that you'll find this really interesting. I gave this 4 stars. I thought it was really good. I really, really liked it, and the thing that I really liked about this book was how the author showed how somebody kind of gets pulled into a cult. It's one of those things, you know, when you think like, how does somebody fall into a cult? How does somebody, you know, believe what these cult leaders are saying? Like, I never was able to understand how somebody gets pulled into a cult. And this book did it really, really well. I think that she showed exactly how it can happen, and kind of, you know, preying on the weak, preying on the vulnerable and the lonely, and it really shows like a very realistic way that you could get pulled into a cult, especially at a young age when you're extremely vulnerable. So I thought this was really good. It was really well done. I really liked the characters, and I read this pretty fast, so I was pretty engaged in it. So the next book that I read was Sheets by Brianna Thumler. This was in my favorite books of the year video. I just thought this was so adorable. Not like a life-changing read, but definitely a good read if you're looking for like a fun graphic novel that's kind of like just a joy to read. I definitely recommend this. I think she's coming out with her second one, I think this year at some point, and I just definitely recommend it if you want something cute and you want something endearing and just something that makes you kind of feel good. This is definitely it because it's just really, really cute. So the next book I read on audio, and this was The Lost City of the Monkey God by Douglas Preston. So this is actually a book that I wanted to read for a very long time. It was on my want to read list on Goodreads, and my uncle loves to read, and we were kind of texting back and forth like books to read and stuff like that, and he's really into like nonfiction and stuff like that, and he said, read The Lost City of the Monkey God. It is so good and you're gonna love it. And so I decided to start listening to it on audio, and this book is really fascinating, I have to say. Like, I think I gave this book 3 stars, and there's a few reasons for it. This is like a high 3, though, if I'm being honest. So this book is basically about the White City, and it's in Honduras, and it was a city that was like, that was said to be there, but nobody actually discovered it yet. So it was like a discovery that was yet to be discovered. And people had said that they had found it, and people had, you know, pretended and faked it that they had found this city, and they wrote journals on it. This city was never found. Well, in the 90s, this man decided that he wanted to go find this lost city. He wanted to discover it, and he did. He went down into the Amazon rainforest with a group of people, and they ended up finding the White City, also known as the Lost City of the Monkey God, and they explored it. And it's really interesting if you like archaeology and that kind of thing, which was very fascinating. And the cool thing about this novel is it takes place in the Amazon rainforest, which I think the Amazon rainforest is fascinating. I've talked about this in the past with the book The Speed of Falling Objects. The Amazon rainforest just interests me. Like, how it's so deadly. Like, there's so many crazy things that can happen to you in the Amazon rainforest, and it talks about their journey into it and how dangerous it was, and it talks about how they found it. They used like new technology for the times to find this place, and it was just really, really cool if you like exploration stories, especially true exploration stories. The other really cool thing that it talked about was the diseases that they got when they were in there. I thought that was one of the most interesting segments of this book, was when it was talking about the diseases they got from bug bites and things like that, because there's an insane amount of bugs in the Amazon rainforest. And it was just really, a fascinating read. But if you're not like a history person, I wouldn't necessarily say this is for you. As you guys know, I've said this in past videos, I'm not a huge history buff. Like, it's not something that I find a ton of interest in. And there was definitely a lot of chapters in this book that was very focused on the history of, you know, different groups of people, different cultures and things like that. And that kind of thing just doesn't seem to pull my attention or interest. And so during those chapters I was a little bit bored, but then there was other chapters that were so fascinating. So it's one of those books where it just totally depended on the chapter that I was reading on whether or not I was enjoying it. So that's kind of why I gave it 3 stars. But overall I thought it was a pretty interesting book. It just totally depends on what you like as a reader, especially when it comes to nonfiction. So the next book obviously was a book I hated, Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahurin. I talked about this in my most disappointing reads. This is probably my most disappointing read of 2020. I am going to link my most disappointing reads video down below so you guys can go watch that video. I go into great detail there about what I didn't like about this book. So I'm not going to talk about it here, but this book was so disappointing for me that I actually am debating on whether I'm going to finish the series or not. If people say the last one is good, then I will, but I don't know. I just really was disappointed in this book, and it made me question my love for the first book. Like, did I love the first book as much as I thought I did? But yeah, very disappointed. Very, very disappointed. So the next book is another graphic novel. This was Bottled by Chris Gooch. So this is a graphic novel I picked up just on a whim from the library, and I gave this book 2 or 3 stars, I can't remember. This is another perfect example of a skeleton of a story. I'm going to use that term all the time now because it's so good to describe certain books. And I feel like this wasn't bad. It's very like kind of the mundane of adulthood and like what happens in adulthood and in relationships and stuff like that. So it definitely has that very realistic quality to it. But I cannot remember anything about this. Like, it just did not stick with me at all. When I got done reading it, I was just kind of like, okay, that was a story, but it was just so lackluster that it didn't stick with me at all. I don't think I would recommend this, and over time, I think I might lower my rating on this only because it didn't stick with me. Like, I didn't know that I was just gonna forget everything about it. It just didn't have a lot of meat to it to make you feel like it really makes an impact on you in a good way or a bad way. It was just very neutral. So the next book is The Chaos of Standing Still by Jessica Brody. I talked about this in my best books of the year video. A lot of these books ended up on my best and worst, which is crazy. This was a really good book about a girl getting stuck in an airport on the eve of her friend's death, or the anniversary of her friend's death. So she was stuck in the airport. She really wanted to get home because she didn't want to deal with all of that emotion, all of that grief at the airport. But it's a snowstorm, so she can't get home. And she ends up meeting this guy because they accidentally swap phones. And it's kind of like this overnight story about their relationship and kind of how their relationship impacts her grief and like how she comes to terms with her grief. It's written so well. Like, the past and present timelines is usually something that I don't love, but it worked so fantastically in this book because it really, really made you understand the grief that she had. And it was so well done. Like, the way that the author plotted this story, I personally think was very, very genius. I think she knew exactly what she wanted to do and how she wanted to do it, and she was extremely successful with it. Like, the way that she showed her come to terms with the fact that, yes, her friend was wild and crazy and all of that kind of thing, but she is her own person without her friend. Like, she often felt like in her shadow, or that like she was only great and wonderful when she had her friend with her, and then without her it was kind of like, who am I now? Like, I'm a nobody. And I think that she did a really good job at showing how she came to terms with the fact that that's not true. I don't know, I just thought it was really an interesting story. And like I said in my favorite books of the year video, this needs to be a movie. I think it would make a great like teen movie. Very John Green type of feel to it, and I think that this is a good, well done book. I would like to see more from Jessica Brody just because I want to see if the rest of her books have the same quality to it as far as like how she plots her stories. Okay, so this next book was a 3-star read for me. I read a lot of 3-star reads in this kind of wrap up, and I feel like I didn't have the best luck with the books in this kind of like reading cycle. It was just not my like it was not a 5-star reading cycle. Like, I think I read a couple that were maybe 5, but most of my books were 3. And this falls into the 3-star category, and it is Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. Now, I was super excited to read a Carrie Maniscalco book. I've heard good things about this series and not so good things about this series, but I really wanted to read The Wicked Kingdom, I think is what it's called. It just came out. Is that what the name is? I think it is. And I heard amazing things about that. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try this book just to see if I like Carrie Maniscalco. Now, the thing about this book is there was things I absolutely adored about it, and there was things that I didn't like about it. It was one of those books where, like, I feel like this book should have been adult. That's the first thing. Like, I understand that they're apprentices and they're supposed to be young, but I still don't feel like this should have been a young adult book. They feel older. Like, Thomas Cresswell feels older. She feels older. And it just, the feeling of this book was an adult book, in my opinion, and I feel like it should have been. So one thing that I loved about this book was the forensic aspect to it. I thought it was very well done and very interesting. I think that she went into a lot of detail. She did her research, and it was very dark, and that's kind of another reason why I think this should have been adult, is because I think that she almost could have gone darker with it. And yeah, I just really liked that forensic aspect to it. The other thing I loved about it too was the main character, Audrey Rose. So I know that some people don't like her character, but I loved her character, and I'm going to tell you why. So as you guys know, I'm huge into the Enneagram, and I think that it is so rare to find Enneagram 5 females. You see them in male characters all the time, like males tend to be 5s, but Audrey Rose was the perfect epitome of the Enneagram 5, and I relate a lot to the Enneagram 5. Every time I take the test, I get 5. And so when I saw Audrey Rose and kind of saw how she just behaved and how she like interacted with the world and her obsession with forensic science and stuff like that, like, she was just such a 5, and I absolutely loved it because it's so rare to find a character, I feel like Audrey Rose and the way she was depicted. And I just thought it was so fascinating and interesting, and I thought the character development in this story was just really, really well done. But the thing that I didn't like, and the reason why I gave this 3 stars, is because I just found myself losing interest a lot. It was super hard for me to pick up this book. I just wasn't super excited to pick this book up. It was very like kind of meandering and a little bit slow. I wouldn't say that the kind of twist or anything was really that crazy either. I think it was just kind of about like, it's just one of those stories where you have to just narrow down each character. Could it be this person? Maybe. Could it be this person? Maybe. Could it be this person? Probably not. And it's just narrowing down the characters, and then at the end you figure out who it is and you're like, okay, well, cool. I don't know. It was just kind of one of those books. I do want to try maybe one more in the series, see if I kind of like it a little bit more. I do like Thomas Cresswell. I really like his character. I do think of him as like 35, and I think of Audrey Rose as 35. They are not teenagers to me at all. So in my head, Thomas Cresswell is like a 35-year-old man. But I do like Thomas Cresswell's personality and kind of the dynamic between Audrey Rose and Thomas Cresswell. I think that they have a good dynamic, and I think it's really an interesting dynamic. So I would like to try out one more, see if maybe I like it a little bit better. But this one was just kind of so-so for me, which was kind of sad. Now, the last book I decided to pick up before the end of the year, I actually didn't finish this book. I did finish this book last year. This is The Guest List by Lucy Foley, and this was, I think this got an award on Goodreads for like best thriller, I'm pretty sure. So I actually listened to this on audio, and I have to say, I gave this book 4 stars. I liked this book more than I thought I was gonna like this book, if we're being honest. Like, the weird thing about this book is it's very slow in the beginning. So this book is about like a wedding that happens on an island. It's like a D-list actor and his type A fiance, and they decide that they want to have their wedding on this kind of creepy haunted island. And so they have all of their guests come to this island, and each guest, it's like a multi-perspective story, so each guest has different chapters, and you can kind of find out like the tie each guest has with each other and all that kind of thing. And then you kind of find out at the end there ends up being a murder, and at the end you find out who it was and who did it, type of thing. It's like an Agatha Christie type of story. I've never read Agatha Christie, but that's how a lot of people describe it to be. And I didn't actually love this at the beginning. This book was really slow at the beginning. There were certain perspectives that I just wasn't interested in, like the groomsmen. I was like, I can't keep track of all these groomsmen. There's so many of them, and I don't know who is who, and I just hated the groomsmen aspect of it because I was confused the whole time with what groomsman was like what groomsman, you know what I mean? And I just kind of felt like it was a little bit slow. Like, I didn't know what was important information at the beginning, and I was just kind of like, okay, is this important, or is this just like dumb stuff she's adding into the book? Like, this doesn't feel that important, and it just felt kind of slow, and I wasn't really sure where the book was going. And So I wasn't actually sure if I was gonna like this. I actually kind of debated on DNFing it, but then about halfway through, it started to get really interesting. I was really interested in the little sister's perspective and kind of how her like relationship with Hannah was developing, and then Hannah and her husband Charlie and all that kind of stuff. It started to get really interested in all the ties that these characters had with each other. And then all of these like interesting like connections started coming out, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And I started getting really into these characters and their connections that they had with each other. And kind of by the end, I would say that I was pretty invested, and I was really interested in these characters, and I kind of liked the twist that happened and all of that stuff. Like, I have to say, by the end, I was into it, but I can 100% see how somebody would not like this story, and how somebody would be like, okay, like that was okay. Like, I can totally see that. I think it was just one of those weird things for me where I just really started to connect myself to the characters and their stories, and that's why I kind of started to like it. And maybe it's also because I listened to it on audio versus reading it physically. I don't know if I would have liked this as much if I would have read it physically, so it's kind of, I think, depends on how you take in this story as well. But I gave it 4 stars. I actually thought it was pretty cool by the end, and I enjoyed it by the end. But I'm really surprised to say that because I don't feel like this is a book that I normally would have liked or suspected myself to like as much as I did, but I did like it. So yeah. So that is it, you guys, for this wrap up. I hope it was pretty good. I'm trying to like do this as quickly as I can because my girls are at school right now for 2 hours, so I'm trying to like do this as quickly as I can, and I needed to get this done because I have so many books that I need to share with you guys. I've already read 5 books this year, and it's only in the middle of January. Like, that's crazy to me. But anyways, I will talk to you guys in my next video, and I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will talk to you guys soon. Bye!